Oh, I thought I could finish my tea before I started. Procedural. Man, I cannot use words. Hey crew, welcome to Devlog number 7. It's been a long time. There's a good reason for that. We took a good chunk of time for the last 4 or 5 months. We threw out a lot of the existing animation system, replacing it with a completely procedural animation system. There is a ton of stuff to show you guys on that in the future. It's looking really, really good. Everything's feeling more connected and more lively and in tune with the environment. So it's really, really excited about all of that. We'll get to that. However, I did want to start up these devlogs again in the meantime. There have been quite a few of you, probably I've had over 10 requests now, referencing various procedurally generated things that we've released, through TikTok or Twitter on our social medias. And I wanted to kind of go through them today, because we do have we built a custom solution for our procedurally generated needs, so to speak. So Haber and I have been working on a self-contained, it's a single blueprint. We've been working on this procedurally generated mesh generation tool. And this is kind of on the heels of the 5.2 procedurally generated stuff coming into Unreal that hasn't quite met our needs. There's a lot of good functionality there, and we'll keep looking at it, but we really need something with a little bit more mesh within mesh, and that'll make sense in a little bit, but something a little bit more custom to our needs. So as I said, we've been exploring this on social media and kind of putting it out there, and you guys have, a few of you have responded, quite a few of you have been looking into it. So this is actually something we're considering releasing. So as you're kind of watching this, let us know any feedback, of course, but let us know if this is actually something that we should potentially release, if other people would benefit from this tool as well. So this will be a long devlog. There's a lot to show here, so I probably will break this up into 2 or 3 pieces. I'd like to keep these devlogs to 10 to 15 minutes max. All right, let's get into it. So I'm actually going to jump into Blender real quick using 3.5, and just for the sake of context, the system that we use, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a workflow on our procedurally generated stuff. So this just happens to be one of our many files, asset files, where we house and finalize and size and standardize a bunch of different assets that are coming in to import into Unreal. So here you'll see we're going to be focusing on the wall segments and the floor segments. Well, actually specifically the floor segments, because that's what I'll be showing you today. So these are basically all of for our one of our interior floor systems. These are all the different meshes that we use for procedurally generated floors. So here's a 1x1 tile, here's a 1x3 tile, pretty plain. These are all textured in Unreal, so these are just bare models. But we have a glow rod, 1x2, right? There's a glass. This is actually the glass piece that goes over top of it. You'll see. So that would be an example of a submesh that gets generated on top of a mesh, because you're going to want to break that glass, or it's going to want to sound different, right? So there's a bunch of different reasons that we need that submesh capability. So anyway, so there's a bunch of different floor models, right? So long story short, we take all these, right? We export them, we take them all, we export them obviously as an FBX file. However you normally export your FBX files. For us it's these don't have armatures attached to them, so it's just a mesh. I standardize around X forward, Z up for our project. Geometry, we usually do face smoothing, and that's it. You exporting these into an FBX file, and then you import them into Unreal. So let me switch over to Unreal, and here you see just an outdoor test scene we're working with. I've been actually playing a little bit in Gaia, trying to get working on the multiplayer, exterior portions of the multiplayer level. So it's a little bit prettier than nothing, so I'm just gonna come into here. So real quick, you'll notice in our project we have basically all of what I just showed you has already been imported. So here's our 1x1 panel. Here's the 1x2 glow rods, for instance. All these have dynamic textures associated with them. So all of these are in place, and these are the meshes that I'm going to be using to kind of demo this today. So coming back to the procedural system again, this is one of the requirements that we wanted for ourselves, to have this self-contained thing that can be used for anything. So here it is, BP procedural static mesh generators. Drag it into your scene. I'm going to lift it up off the ground so we can get a little see what's kind of going on here. Actually, let me head back to Blender really quick, because I do want to show. I forgot to show you guys one thing. You'll notice on these panels, and you'll quickly see why we do this. So on these panels, we actually have depth to them, so they have sides. So it's not just a flat plane. And there's a reason even these guys right here have sides, some depth, and just want to point that out really quick. All right, so active or not, you'll notice over here, and there's a couple the default parameters over here. Really quick, active is whether it's actively generating or not, so you can turn that off and it won't generate anymore. Pivot location, that's essentially the origin point. So if you're looking to create a wall from the ground up, we can have it at the bottom center, and you can generate up and out, right? If you want to generate from a corner. So these are essentially the location that you can generate from. So it comes in handy especially if you want specific axes you're working with, so you don't have to keep rotating stuff. You can work with things through a pivot location. Seed is obviously randomization. So if you ever find a configuration you like or a generation you like, you can get back to it by noting the seed, and provided everything's in the same place, right? You can get back to that seed to have the same look that you were looking for. And then you will see here there's generated layers and submeshes. So in this, I'll actually create a layer right now. You'll see I can create a whole layer. So think of this as like I could put together a wall in this layer, right? So I can have all these different types of panels that make up this wall, right? But then I can have another layer that's a subset wall or a different wall, and maybe it's a destructible wall over top of that foundational wall, right? Another use case would be I have a ceiling, right? And then I have another generated layer over top of it for the rafters, right? So I have all these all these meshes that are conforming together, no spacing and stuff like that, using for the first layer, but then I have the layer rafter layer over top of it, which I'll actually show you an example of that. And then submesh structures. So submeshes are actually meshes that are attached to other meshes. So you'll see why we wanted that and needed that shortly. So I'm gonna go ahead and add in, you'll see I'll get to these parameters here, but in this first layer, I'm actually gonna go into the mesh structures and add my first static mesh. So again, I'm going to come here. I'm going to go into floor segments. I'll add the 1x1 here, and I gotta click on this, and then I'll add it to add it here. You notice there's nothing showing yet, and now I'll get into this isn't a mesh based. This isn't a mesh-based, like 2 meshes by 3 meshes type of generation. This is a distance-based system, which is very important for us. So you're not going to have, and we can turn it on and off, and I can show you the difference, but this is so your walls can be exactly the same size. And I know what you're saying. Well, won't things start looking weird, right? Your panels are different sizes if you start resizing automatically. Well, you tell me, I guess, as we get into it, you'll kind of see the power, I think, of the system that we made, which we're incredibly happy with. All right, so I added the first one. I'm going to actually go ahead and give a total column size. This is Unreal Units of 2000, and I'm actually going to do a total row size of 3000. So this is 3000 long, 2000 wide. And again, you're not gonna see anything show up here until you actually add the space between rows. So this will vary depending on your meshes. I happen to know for the ones I'm working with, I think it's right now it's 178. So I pop that in, and boom, we have ourselves a floor. Done and done, right? Hardly. And forgive me the tracing, because I have some traces still on here as well. So just bear with me on that. All right, so we have our procedural generated floor made up of one panel. So I'm actually going to go ahead and really quickly add in a second panel. So in my mesh structure, I'm going to minimize this so you guys can see what's going on. I'm going to add a second mesh and open this up, and let's add in a second mesh. Let's add the glow rods actually as the second mesh here. So as I enter that in, as it pops in, you'll see this starting to work already. So we have a pretty good split, and I'll get to the parameters to control all that, but you'll see that there are floor panels here, and there's glow floor panels, the glow rods here, you'll see. So backing up on this, you'll see we have two meshes in here. And now I will actually want to, this is a good opportunity to show you the submesh structure. So in these submeshes, there's a bunch of parameters here, but I'm going to actually go to submesh index, and I'm actually going to add submesh index 0. I'm going to keep that as 0 right now. I'm actually going to go down to my submesh structures, and I add in a submesh structure, and you're going to see it's very similar this to the other parameter set for the main meshes, right? So my sub mesh structure is 0, right? So this mesh, I'm linking it to this sub mesh structure 0. I'm actually going to come in here, and for the glow rod, I have the glass. And I come in here and add the glass as a substructure. Boom. Now it lines up. Everything lines up perfectly. Shading's a little off on the glass, but everything lines up perfectly because in Blender, I'm going to switch back over to Blender for a second. I happen to have, I'm going to open this up. I happen to have that glass imported around 0, lined up perfectly with this, with the mesh, right? But that might not always be the case. Like you might have to, depending on how your circumstances, you might not be able to import them in the same file, right? So, or the same origin point. So heading back over to Unreal, that's why it's perfect. I just wanted to, that's why it's perfectly kind of aligned up here. So point being, we can actually see, this is the first submesh link we have. So now this mesh only belongs to this main mesh, so to speak. And in here, this is a good time actually to tell you guys about the transform and translation variance. So for transform, let's say for instance, well, let's actually go to give you a simple example. So on the first mesh, the 1x1 panel, let's say, and this is a reason for the depth. Again, heading back over to Blender for a second. This is a reason for the depth that we have on these floors. That I mentioned before, and if we want to do something like permanently, you see transform parameters over here. So if we permanently wanted to make all those panels 10 units lower, boom, across the board we have now 10. Everything is 10 units, 10 units lower. Bring that back to 0. Same thing with rotation and scale too. But let's say we want 10 degrees rotation on this floor for whatever reason. For instance, maybe there's some main vents or something. I mean, whatever the use case is, right? You can actually rotate on all these actions, doing the x-axis too. There you go. So bringing that back to 0. So that's across the transform is for globally across the board. Now, for us, the main use case for us would be, we do want variances as height. We didn't want smooth surfaces. We wanted it very rough in terms of height variance. So that's where translation variance comes into. So we're still in the first mesh here. I'm going to come into the translation variance, and I don't want it to move this way or this way, back and forth or side to side. But I do want variance in height. So I'm going to go into my Z, and the minimum I want that the minimum I want that to be is -20, and the max I want it to be is 0. So you'll notice that's probably too much, because how we built these, you're getting some gaps here. So let me actually do that to -10. All right, cool. So now if I look around, you'll notice there is a bunch of variants. They're not all the same height. They vary in depth. They vary in depth everywhere from -10 to 10 on all the placements now. So you can start building some unique looking kind of structures and floor plans here, right? All right, that's actually a good place to hole up and stop for this part one. We went through kind of initial setup and kind of workflow, and then some initial translation type of parameters. So we're going to get into kind of the rotational stuff and a few really cool things in the next part. So that should be a few days away. All right, thanks guys.